Hey, everybody, this is a super special episode with my friend Joseph Logan. He is an executive coach who works with founders and CEOs and high performers who are trying to navigate success after they've already achieved it, which, spoiler alert, doesn't always feel the way people expect. Honestly, this was the episode that cracked something wide open for me. It's the episode that triggered my rebrand that I've got coming up because our conversation really colored outside of the lines of what we normally talk about on the show, but in the best possible way, in the way that everybody needs to hear. We talk about the normal things like executive coaching and burnout and time management and emotional intelligence, all the usual suspects. You will absolutely get better just by listening to that part of the episode. But what made it even better is where it wandered into life outside of work, into healing, expansion, and what it really means to wake up and make this life yours. I share a little bit of my own personal story and journey here that I hadn't talked about on the show before or really anywhere. And Joseph brought such a grounded and generous energy to the conversation. And I'm so grateful for him that he held so much space for me and listened in a way that is helping the show come into its next iteration. He has so many good one-liners in this episode, I couldn't even write them all down. And because this episode really floored me in the best way, I used to have a piece of paper. I wrote down all the amazing one-liners he had in this episode, but I've since lost it to my car. It's been swallowed up. But the way Joseph speaks, I think you'll really enjoy. And the advice and the life experience he has, this episode, like I said, you can't help but get better just from listening to it. I know you're going to get a lot out of it. I know I got a lot out of it, and I can't wait to have him on again. He's become a very good friend of mine and a friend to the show. So enjoy the episode. A lot of your work as an executive coach is probably a little bit tactics, but a lot like therapy.
It can really look like therapy, and I think sometimes people mistake it. I have a specific call out in my welcome letter to new clients that says, I need to say this once, I'm not trained or licensed as a psychotherapist. If you get into something that is outside of my scope, I'm happy to recommend someone who does that kind of thing. But, it can be easy to fall into because it is two people talking to each other. One of those people listening for patterns and signs and tells. And, it really does look like it. I think the big difference is that therapy is often about figuring out how you got to where you are today. Coaching for me is about figuring out where you are today and what it's going to look like tomorrow.
You had a corporate career before you were an executive coach, correct?
Yep, that's right.
At what point, well, tell us a little bit, like what were you doing before? What was Joseph's path? Like what corporate trajectory were you on? And what was the moment where you were like, you know what, I'm going to pivot and do this instead?
And it's generous of you to assume that I had a path at all. I think most of the best things in my life have just been happy accidents. But, prior to doing this, I think I'll actually start just before that corporate career was really in full swing. I went to grad school and I spent 2 years with a group of 28 people who, as a group, constituted a learning laboratory. We were there to not only learn about group dynamics, but to participate in group dynamics and to notice and observe what was happening. And I remember a guy who looked a lot like me one time during that program saying, "Hey y'all, this coaching thing, there's nothing to it. There's no substance there. You will never be able to feed a family that way." Sitting here today, it's like, cringe just a little bit, but
Sounds like someone who's not very good at it.
yeah, yeah, I rejected this whole idea of coaching for the longest time, and it wasn't about coaching at all. It was about me and my willingness to look at myself. And that group experience was pretty powerful for me. Prior to that, I had been so left brain, rational, analytic that I couldn't even tolerate the idea that I would have emotions I wasn't interested in, whether you had them. I was suppressing some deep, deep stuff there. And that really provoked a transformation, an expansion, where I finally came to acknowledge my own emotions, to become interested in those of others, and to really sink into that.
I think that's helpful for people to hear because that can happen to man or woman. One of my best friends was very emotionally shut down, and she's a woman, and she's made great strides to realize what empathy is. But it had a lot to do with how she was raised in her childhood. So, was that do you mind if I ask, was that a reflection of the household you grew up in, where emotions not talked about?
Totally. And it wasn't just talked about. I think there was a pretty active message throughout childhood. Never let them see you cry. Never let them see you sweat. And, kind of an F your feelings sort of vibe.
That's so blue collar. That's so like, let's just get it done. Roll your sleeves up, rub some dirt in it. I had a fire chief dad and two much older brothers who were nationally ranked wrestlers and football players, and I played basketball. We did all the instruments and all the sports, all the church, and there was no time for emotions. But I have a ton of emotions. If anything, I've always had emotions. I was born with big feelings, and so I definitely didn't fit into that dynamic very well.
That so resonates.
Yeah.
Yeah. The fact that we don't experience our emotions doesn't mean that we don't have them. The big shift for me was, do I have emotions or do they have me? And I would say for the first 30 years of my life or so, they had me.
I love your content. What you just said and what you've been posting on LinkedIn is so thought provoking. I really hope you take all these posts and turn them into like a quick little book. I mean, the way that you talk a lot about expansion and removing constraints and changing your story, how to set intentions and ask yourself better questions to get unstuck. I mean, the stuff you're writing about, sometimes I read it, you're scrolling LinkedIn and you can say, oh, someone used Chat GPT to write that. This person's just angry, and you're just scrolling, looking for something helpful. Your stuff stops me in my tracks, and I'll have to sit and think about it. I get to sit and think about it for like at least 5 or 10 minutes afterward. It stays with me all day. So I guess there's no question there other than I really have been enjoying your content. It's different than what people are posting on LinkedIn. It's very helpful. So I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. And, for what it's worth, yours as well. I will stop when I see that you posted something and just go, oh man, what's Christie going to set fire to today?
Someone messaged me. I get this message in different forms lately. They go, "Thank you so much for punching corporate in the face." And I'm like, "Well, that's good feedback. Maybe I need to put in more solution focused stuff." But, talking about emotions, I'm very angry at how my career unfolded. I'm more toward acceptance and the acceptance part of the grief stages, and like how can I use that experience and that trauma, which I'll put a capital T on, for good. So learning to cope with the burnout and the lack of management training and the lack of direction and the do this, not do as I say, not as I do type leadership, that was lots of years of what I would call corporate abuse. And it's been really fulfilling for me to get to interact with your content and post mine and just tell that I feel like we're truth tellers. Yours is very tactical. Mine is like, there's nothing wrong with you. This is weird for all of us. And, this is a bit of a matrixy situation. So like take the red pill or the blue pill. Your content's like, if you want to take the blue pill, I forget which one wakes you up. Like, here's some questions to ask yourself. Let's wake you up.
You could not have come to me 15 years ago. I could not have come to the person I was 15 years ago and held out what I have to offer and gotten any hearing, any acceptance at all. Me 15 years ago would have said, get the fuck out of here. Who are
Mm.
you? I think there's a couple layers to what you're saying, and this will probably lead back into corporate life, but one thing that's become clearer to me is that in a system that is designed a certain way, that values certain implicit things, people behave in certain ways without necessarily having real understanding of why they're doing it.
Yes. Very reactional, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, The Matrix is, a fantastic example. My coach and I, it's not a coaching session unless at some point one of us comes back to The Matrix and says, it's like that scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a real thing. It's not that corporations are necessarily bad. It's not that there's any great conspiracy to keep down the masses. It's a thing that is designed kind of on a metaphor. And that metaphor is absolutely pervasive. It infuses every bit of every day of your world, but it's kind of invisible to everyone. So, when Morpheus is saying, "Hey, it's the question that that is like the splinter in your mind," you know, that's when I think I start to see people kind of wake up. And I'll just add here, I don't think this idea of remaking the corporation into something that is loving and nurturing and sustaining, I don't think that happens. I don't think it is possible for that to happen. I think there's just a set of imperatives, specifically in efficiency and throughput, that I think they're kind of baked in. And as much as, a company might try to do something really good, they might try to bring more women onto the executive team or be more customer focused or all of that. They're always battling against those implicit drivers of efficiency and throughput. And when there's a conflict between the two, efficiency and throughput will always win.
And a lot of the content I keep putting out there, I'm curious if you agree, just like side caveat. And then I want to talk about the patterns that you notice with a lot of the people you tend to coach. But I feel like they're kind of related. A lot of the executives who think my content is bullshit, they'll tell me to my face. I've had people raise their voice at me in public, at events. They'll tell me, like, no offense, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, kid. Like, your content is stupid. And I'm like, that's fine. But employees really want clarity. Like, we don't want the snack boxes and the pizza party. We want clear expectations and teams that are high functioning because we have the resources and the training to use the resources, and a leader who leads, which creates more throughput and efficiency. So it's kind of like one leads to the other. And so, like, that's why I keep harping on surveys. Someone told me the other day, they're like, there's only so much you can talk about surveys, Christie. I'm like, I know, but until everyone gets it, I also don't agree. I could talk about surveys and that be my only content piece and say something different every single day, because it's such a critical foundation on which you even find out who needs the coaching on the executive side, like who's not got the soft skills, who's leading the wandering meeting and acting like a jerk because they're being reactive to their emotions of their scarcity and their lack mindset as a leader. So I feel like it is like a slippery slope trying to figure out how to heal corporate. But I think it all begins with going back to your content. Like, you want to change the world, you focus on yourself. There's plenty to work on with ourselves. And you're an executive coach. So have you noticed that there's like clear tendencies, or like, is every client completely different? I mean, sorry, I'm monologuing, but
I love it.
Do there tend to be patterns? Like, in my coaching calls with HR leaders, there are clear patterns. I have no time, I have no budget, and I have a victim mentality. What are the patterns that you tend to see with your clients, if any?
Well, one of the things that I would share with you, and I don't recall exactly where I received this, but someone way, way back said, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. Someone who is saying, I don't have time or I don't have budget, that tells me about where they are.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing of change is pretty simple. People change when not changing is less comfortable than whatever it takes to change. What I notice more and more about my clients, my ideal client, I should say, is that they have worked hard to achieve something and they've tasted some amount of success. The person who hasn't achieved the success yet has this illusion that's really, really hard to pierce until you've actually achieved success and seen what it actually feels like. And that illusion is and then I will be happy syndrome. And I can tell you, any sentence you can finish with, and then I will be happy, it's guaranteed not to bring you happiness.
I'm taking notes right now because, like, I'm like, ooh, this hits me right now.
It's something I've just seen over and over. I've been doing this, it's coming up on 16 years now. And that theme is pretty prevalent among just about anyone I will meet, unless and until they've achieved some measure of success and had some thought that's kind of along the lines of, well, I did the thing. Why am I not happy? Why am I not fulfilled? And the thing might be, selling your company, raising around, getting the big house, marrying the perfect person. You know, it can be any of those things. But lesson I wish I had had as a kid is that your goals are kind of there for a direction, and it's good to take them seriously, but a little lightly. The thing you have control over isn't that goal. It's what you're doing today. And it's just that incremental thing. You look around and say, hey, you know, where am I? Who am I? What am I doing? And in a given day, the things that you do, small as they seem, they do tend to compound.
Mm-hmm. Have you read the book Atomic Habits?
Oh, yeah.
That's a banger of a book. That's a good one.
By the way, I am not paid by James Clear at all, but my goodness, sign up for his newsletter. It's amazing. It's the 321 newsletter.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, I'm not a huge fan of email. I try to avoid it as much as possible. But when his email hits, it's like, oop, stop everything. I want to see what he has to say.
Can you explain at a high level the concept of the book Atomic Habits? I mean, I recommend everyone read it, but how would you summarize it?
Yeah, I would summarize it with a sentence from the book that James Clear uses pretty often. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you want to become.
Ouch. Thinking about my morning, there were many shortcuts taken, and I know this, and there's shame involved, and there's like, I love that. I'm a very visual person, and that book helped me a lot. A lot of business books, I'm like, ugh, this is boring. But for me, that just imagine if you make small changes over time, that completely steers the ship in a completely different and better direction. So the smallest things you may think may not add up, but they absolutely compound and have big rewards for you after you've put in the time and staying consistent.
He unlocked something magical with that. And I don't think that's necessarily a concept that a lot of people necessarily have baked in from childhood or from education or whatever. We're told from really early on, or at least I was told very early on, you can be anything you want. You can be an astronaut or the president of the United States or the CEO of this company or whatever. And, that's more or less true, I guess. But, you get fixated on that goal and you forget the real place of influence is right now, showing up right now.
Yeah. I think we all want to hurry up and be something. But for me, I wanted to be a chief marketing officer, probably because I wanted the notoriety and to have the weight to throw around and to have a big team and be at the executive table. But I actually didn't want that. And I think you and I talked about this a little bit before we recorded when we first met. I had a psychedelic therapeutic ceremonial trip to kind of reset. Like, why do I feel so stuck and lost? And part of it was, I don't even like marketing. I just thought that was a way to apply my creativity in a way that would make me rich. But once again, like you said, when I'm rich.
Well, I'm curious about the psychedelic experience and, say as much or as little as you want about
Mhm.
it. But what was the container for it? Like how was it guided and what were the intentions and how did they bring you into it?
The intention was very this will be an ego death. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. I need my ego to survive. What does that mean? But it was presented as if you are just feeling hopeless, if life is becoming a movie that you don't even feel like you're the main character, this is an opportunity to remember that you're the main character and get clear on what it is that you were meant to do. Or what you've been ignoring, what truths have subconsciously been circling you that you just can't hear because it's almost like the more my marketing career wasn't happening the way I thought, the more I clung to it and pushed it away even more. The more we want something, the more the law of attraction doesn't give it to us. You have to be in flow. So I was like, what do I have to lose? I'm at the time it was like, I'm 33. I'm a demand gen marketer. I've got 2 kids. I feel like a loser. I had friends who were VPs at this point and already been CMOs. And I was sick of feeling like it was never going to happen for me. So the clarity I got from that experience, I can only explain it as Intuitive thoughts, they call them downloads. You just know things suddenly about yourself, things that were always there. At least you can access your truth suddenly. All the walls come down, metaphorically, because the world becomes a video game and it's very jarring the first time you do it, but kind of beautiful and incredible. And I just was given all this peace and told it's not happening because it's not what your gift is and it's not even what you want. And that's okay. It was very loving. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You have plenty of time and you're a healer. You're supposed to be talking about why these things are hard for all kinds of people. You're not even on the wrong seat of the bus. You're like on the wrong bus, on the wrong continent. Girl, just get on a plane and go where you're meant to be. And ever since I came out of that experience, I just knew that my gift is to ask questions and be curious and tell people my story, what's happened to me when I felt lost, and apply my business skills to this HR persona that I love when I was doing product marketing research on them when I was miserable in my marketing career. It's like it wasn't for nothing. I was studying the HR persona so deeply that I've now created the only engagement training that exists. So it actually wasn't even wasted time. I was getting ready and preparing for, I was the disengaged employee, which is what I talk about all the time. I had to experience that. Who else could make the training on how to drive engagement other than someone who's lived it? HR can't always help HR in a silo. So it's like all that knowledge came to me at once and I was like, oh, this is okay. I can completely drop the pressure of this career not happening and go do what I enjoy anyway, which is to talk and create templates and guides and be helpful and help people see things a different way, which is kind of what you do too. Like I like to see people have breakthroughs. So that was the long answer to,
Yeah, that's the magic for me. And how is it even possible that that didn't exist before you got there? I mean, what, 86% of people are actively disengaged?
listen, Joseph, I've had some dark nights of the soul, like praying to whoever, the universe, God, whoever you believe is in charge of this little video game matrix. I'm like, surely it's not me. You're sending in me to go make a training to solve the existential work crisis. And it's not like I'm, Mel Robbins or Tony Robbins. I'm no talking head crazy egomaniac, but there are moments where I've been on stages and I'm like, it is me. I volunteer as tribute, I guess. Someone's got to do it. So, but there have been moments where I'm like, how has no one built this yet? And they're like, you gonna do it? Just go. Just flow. And every time I flow, which is doing what I love with the show and my community engagement academy, it leads me closer to feeling so much more fulfilled and that I'll be happy when I'm suddenly am happy. But it's weird
Right.
when you're used to misery and unpeacefulness.
I think it was Naval Ravikant that said something about, if you can't be happy with a cup of coffee, you're not going to be happy with a yacht. And
Oh,
it's so freaking simple. You got to start with the happy part and then do stuff to make a dream happen. And, you do it on a daily basis. Most of the time you'll get closer and closer and maybe you hit that dream. Maybe you find a different and better dream. Who knows?
yeah.
For me, we talked earlier about how, I've had my own experience with the psychedelic therapy. That clinic became a familiar place for a bit. And it was actually like watching a play after having been in the play.
Yes.
Like you've seen two acts of Hamlet, and then you get to sit in the front row and watch yourself being Hamlet and going, hey, buddy, are you not seeing what's happening over here? Hey, do you realize acting this way is actually causing those things to happen? So there was kind of this like detachment from the story I was living, just enough so I could see that it was a story and that there were more options than I had considered.
So
And I
many
think a
more
lot of that's
options.
what has led to so much about, expansion. I think expansion is a natural process, expansion of consciousness, of perspective. And, we do things that can allow it, or we do things that inhibit it. And I kind of go in with the idea like, yeah, the person that I'm talking to right now, they're not broken. There's nothing wrong with them. They are going to expand naturally anyway. And if I can help them find the things that are friction to that, that are slowing them down, maybe it happens sooner, more consciously for them. Maybe they get to their goals faster. But I start with the assumption that, no one really needs a coach, but they quite often need the outcomes that a coach can help them get to. And sometimes that's the most direct path.
Having a psychologically safe accountability partner, a lot of people don't even have that in their marriage. Definitely.
Preach.
Hashtag single over here to the point of maybe detriment, because if you don't have people in your life who you can say, I'm messed up, whether it's a coach or, the people you surround yourself with, it's really important to pay attention to who's giving you direction, and do they have your best interest at heart? Are they making you feel bad for having the feelings that you're having? No one's allowed to tell you that your feelings are wrong or bad. So, when people say, oh, you did psychedelics and you suddenly were more clear, so I can do that too, I go, whoa, 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 listen.
Wait.
When you do this, you can't undo it. So you will also suddenly see who's trying to control you. I mean, I had to burn it all down. I got divorced. I had to go no contact with my family, who I love. All these people I still love. But, the stuckness we feel is often because we've outgrown our belief system in a really beautiful way, but we haven't realized it yet. And so what you were willing to tolerate before, like, oh, I deserve to come last. Oh, I deserve to be made to feel like I'm too much. Suddenly, like, psychedelics are 10 years of therapy in about 4 hours. You come out of that and I've never come out of it worse than I was. I always come out better, but like way better. People from the outside will look at that and say, you've completely lost your mind. You do drugs. You're making all these swift changes. You got divorced. You don't talk to people anymore. You moved. You started your own business. You quit everything. And it's like, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. But you have to be like, it kind of forces you to trust yourself and love yourself in a way that people might think you're crazy. And those people are not meant to be in your life. So there's an ego death, but there's also a literal physical world death of people who are not going to get what's happening to you and why it's important for you. And you deserve to have those experiences.
You just said so much there. And by the way, I cut off my family and got divorced and all that. That's not, that's probably not going to be on the advertising for, a psychedelic therapy clinic, but it reveals you to yourself. There's some important things that need to be in place. I think there need to be protocols. There needs to be, a thorough intake process, establishing that you are psychologically healthy to even engage in this particular type of therapy. With me, my doctor and my therapist were both involved when I started that process. And, I felt really, really safe. There was a good container. There was a clear sense of like, okay, here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to be like. Here's some questions we can't answer. These are yours. But, on both sides of it, it was like, you're going to be okay.
Yes.
But then coming out of it, you cannot unsee many of the things that you come to see. And, whether it's a job that's toxic or a relationship or anything like that, I just find that it's really difficult to participate in those things once you see that toxicity that you accepted as okay for however long.
Yes. And, I'm not saying, I'm glad you put that disclaimer on it, because there is some kind of, I think I'm just trying to re-say what you said, but like if you have a family history of mental illness in certain ways, I don't remember exactly what, it's not like being a sociopath, but like you could have a mental breakdown. So you should be like doing this in a controlled setting. This is not meant to be lock yourself in your house alone the first time and do it by yourself, or like do it with people you're not comfortable with. For me, it was such a ceremonial setting that it was with intention that I had these breakthroughs. I think if I was with people I didn't know, or if I was at a party, I would have had what they call a bad trip, because it's way too much at once and it can feel unsafe. But
that to me is the difference between engaging in therapy and just doing drugs.
Yeah, 100%. What's really cool is ever since I've done psychedelics, this is going to sound crazy and hippie, and I don't care because it's true. I get what's called downloads still regularly. And a lot of my templates and guides, people say like, oh, how did you write this? I'm like, it came to me. And I know that sounds crazy. It kind of just gives you access to the universal consciousness and truth, and like everyone's awakening at once. Some of what I'm working on, they've been gifted to me by the all powers that be, God, whatever. I get very specific ideas for videos or guides and templates, and it's like tell CEOs say this, not that, and frame it in this way because that's how I figured out CEOs have a fear mentality and a lack mindset. I talked to a few of them. They grew up poor. They have more insecurity than most of the people at the company, but they present as anger and bullying and um, not approachable. So it's been a ride and like a total gift and a privilege to get to have this weird experience that not only saved my life and put me on a completely different trajectory, but it's done so much good in the content that I've been able to create. I don't know what it is, but it comes from the earth and it's medicine, I guess. So anything we can do to remove the stigma, and I appreciate you even coming on my show just to be willing to talk about it, because I think a lot of that corporate abuse I talk about is people just stuck in their trauma responses, stuck in their bullshit. They're ignoring their truth.
Well, that very idea of expansion and that understanding of how it worked came from some of those experiences. I think what happens, you think about when you're a little kid, and I've written about this before, you know, riding a bicycle seems like an absolutely impossible thing to do. It's just too many things to manage at once. You've got to apply pressure to this pedal, but not to the other one for a minute. And then you got to change it over and do the other thing. And you've got to balance and you've got to steer and, try not to fall over. And then you've got to achieve that certain point of momentum. And, I was talking with my kid about this the other day, and I said, do you remember what it was like not to be able to ride a bike? And, Alex was like, no. I mean, I know it was hard, but then we talked about what the experience was like. And, there's that moment when it clicks and it goes from being a thing you have to try to do and you have to think about doing to a thing that you just do. And then after that, you can pick up any bike that's, of an appropriate size and you can ride any bike. And instead of maybe the end of your driveway being the boundaries of your little world, suddenly you can ride to school or to the grocery store or to your friend's house. And so it actually makes the world bigger. And I do think that's a natural process. We've all had points at which something shifted and our world was a little bigger. And the thing that used to be hard isn't hard anymore. It kind of becomes subconscious and nearly effortless.
Mm.
I think what you get with psychedelic therapy is you get a peek to, kind of beyond that thing that you think are the boundaries of your world, and you see some possibility. But then here's the important part. You're going to come back to this reality. And I think more than the experience itself, the integration really, really matters. Because once you see that possibility, then it's your job to live into it. It's not
Yeah.
something that just gets flipped overnight. You have to show up for life, still in this world, maybe in this job, in this relationship, whatever. And, that's kind of a starting point.
Yes, I love that. There's a responsibility once you see a better way or a way that you can level up. If you can see yourself on a different path, like choose your hard. I love that phrase. Like, what's harder, staying where you're at or trying something new, whether it's riding a bike or metaphorically at work, trying to start to stand up for yourself? Or I teach HR leaders all the time, maybe opposite of your clientele, where you're like, maybe take it easy, you're kind of abrasive. I'm just making assumptions here. I'm sure sometimes you get people who are just not perceived as very approachable. On the flip side, I have HR leaders who were parentified as children and they don't like conflict. So I have to coach them how to use your superpower of empathy to push the business forward. You must stand up to your executive. Otherwise, you'll have a miserable career and the employees will suffer and the business may have more layoffs because decisions are not being made properly with the people in mind who are the revenue drivers. What am I talking about? Shoot, I hate when this happens.
No, you're absolutely speaking my language here. Um, sometimes it is about telling people not to be as abrasive or whatever. I mean, first off, I don't give much advice. I think advice is the lowest form of help. It's kind of like laying an IKEA box on someone's front porch and just saying, all right, good luck with that. Like that person's got to open that box and get that little goofy hex wrench and the cartoon instructions. And they'll be sitting there in the floor 2:30 in the morning, 3 glasses of wine in, going,
Bunch of
I
bad
don't know how to
words.
do
Yeah.
this. So, it's usually more about kind of making the current state a little bit more clear and honestly a bit uncomfortable. Back to this idea that people don't change until not changing is, more uncomfortable than changing. If you can kind of point out the current state and say, wow, this just doesn't seem like it's working for you, people begin to develop an appetite for something else. But you'd be surprised how many, especially startup founders, they kind of hold back. They kind of play safe with their people. And there are a number of reasons for why that is. One of them being, well, we should trust our people and we shouldn't be micromanagers, and we should let our people make good choices and all of that. But what it usually translates to is kind of a subtle abandonment, you know, like, well, I'm not supposed to be a micromanager, so I'm just not going to say anything to Sally and Sally will figure it out. That's not really helpful. So, I think there are places where even like a startup founder or CEO or whomever might be playing small in ways that they're not even conscious of. And they may think they're playing big by not being a micromanager or empowering their people or whatever, but they're actually playing small by not just engaging with their people.
Yes. So who tends to come to you? Is it an executive or a founder who knows that they're struggling? Or are people sent to you like this man, this leader we're having issues with? Will you please coach them?
Yeah, that answer has changed a lot over the years. When I came out of the corporate life, I didn't intend to be a coach. Complete accident, and I'm happy to tell you that story. But early days, it was a lot of startup founders, CEOs, and their teams. I have a pretty healthy interest and strong background in group and team development, and that was kind of my sweet spot early on. But I learned a couple things over the years. One is if a CEO tells you, hey, I really want you to work with my COO or my CFO because they're a real problem, I will smile and nod, but I already know the CEO is where the work is.
Yeah, yeah.
The person might also have some things they can work on, but a CEO who's deferring that conversation and delegating it to a coach, they're forfeiting one of the best parts of their jobs, which is to say, hey, something is an obstacle to you being as brilliant as you are, and I brought you here specifically to allow you to be brilliant, and for some reason that's not happening. Let you and me dig in and figure it out.
Yes.
So when I can engage both the CEO and the person that they want to have help with, that's usually just a powerful combo. But if someone sends me to, work with their chief people officer, I'm like, how involved are you going to be in this? That really matters. I've been one of the, I don't know, I told you that I got into coaching by accident, that so much of my career trajectory has just been a series of happy accidents. I'm basically like the Forrest Gump of the business world. I just seem to show up exactly when something magical is kind of happening. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I got my first 3 or 4 clients without even knowing that I was coaching. I had already told my classmates, like, yeah, this coaching thing, nothing there. I had had 2 coaches during my corporate career. I hated them, absolutely hated them, because they were taking time out of my day, and I was busy and important, and who has time for this? And they wanted to talk about my feelings. I did not want to talk about my feelings. I don't necessarily believe that anyone is thoroughly uncoachable, but I'd say I was about as close as I could get to that. And so when I actually started coaching, that's when I had the experience of what it's like to really hold space for another person, to reflect back to them how they are right now, how they might be should they choose, how many more choices they have, how much happier and fulfilled they can be. So it was just a total accident. I ended up getting clients before I even decided that I was a coach. And that's pretty much been the way everything has happened over the years. People have come to me, there's been referrals. Sometimes VCs or private equity firms will say, oh, we're really having a problem over here in this company. Can you go help? And that conversation always leads to, well, the investors don't understand what we're doing, or the board's not, engaging with us or whatever. But one thing I have been fortunate not to really have to do is actually go out and market and sell. I'm grateful for that. And I'm also, I feel a little bit vulnerable and insecure about it. I know that I don't know how to do it. So you'd asked about who that ideal client is. I used to joke that it's somebody on kind of the back half of midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Someone who's already said, I can't take any more of this shit, but they don't know what it is they actually want to do. What I see most often is, someone has tried really hard to succeed and they have had a taste of success, doesn't feel the way they wanted it to feel. And, they're sitting there and going, I'm only at the halfway point of life. What am I supposed to do now?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I have so much compassion for that. I can hold space for that all day long. And usually those conversations will lead to, well, I've always wanted to do this. Why don't you?
So, like, tactically, do you help people manage their time better too? Is it like clarity on where are you going? What are you great at? But also, do people come to you who have maybe ADHD and they're like, I'm a mess. I can't get anything done?
Totally. Totally. Yeah. That one comes up quite a bit. And I'm also not paid by Brad Stulberg for this endorsement, but my goodness, the book, The Practice of Groundedness, so gets into this. That being busy and that being overwhelmed thing, I get it. A few years back, I took a turn as CEO of one of my client companies to do a turnaround. And first big lesson: be careful what you ask for because you're likely to get it. I ended up making every single mistake that I ever help a CEO try to avoid or try to correct. Once you get into that flood of the overwhelm, you just kind of have natural tendencies. And it really made it clear to me what value I'm providing by just being that objective voice, that peer in relationship who can say, hey, I noticed you said the priority was this, but I noticed you're spending all day doing that. What's up with that? So the time management is, that's what we would call a presenting problem. It's the thing that seems like the problem that actually points to what the actual problem is underneath. Um, Sometimes people wear busy like like a badge or, a medal or like, look how important I am. Well, trust me, I've been there. My my calendar during the pharmaceutical days was double and triple booked every half hour, like I would sometimes make a decision about which meeting to go to coming out the door of the previous meeting. Cause I was wearing that suit. That fancy car must have been important. None of that stuff was important. I couldn't tell you really what any of those meetings were even about now. It's all
Mm-hmm.
in the past.
Yeah.
But, when I see someone really struggling with time management, one of the first things, I'll look for is like, when is there a half hour in this day for you? I'm not asking you to go meditate for 3 straight hours. I'm not asking you to, you know, carve out like no meeting time, although you'll eventually get there. But when is there a half hour when you can sit and just be in your own company? And whew, the reactions to that, they will tell you a ton.
Well, I think everyone just got a really great glimpse into what it's like to work with you. And seriously, like I would call it God's work. It's a mix of like, how do we get you to lean into your gifts and your strengths, but also like, are you okay? And like, what's even causing this in the first place? And that was a really easy to understand explanation of breaking down the presenting problem and then the actual problem. It's our stories that we tell ourselves that create the reality that we live in. Full circle, psychedelics will help you burn it all down in a second and then regrow something much healthier sometimes. But, psychedelics not necessarily necessary to see huge growth.
That's absolutely true. There are a lot of ways to get there. that just happens to be a fast train to the destination, but there are a lot of ways to get there. And, you know, I'll come back to something we discussed early on. I don't believe that I am here to fix anyone because I don't think they're broken. They may have illusions about what matters or what they have to do or who they need to be, but I start from the premise, A, that this person in front of me is already pretty freaking amazing, and that the things they want, the thing that's keeping them from those things, is somewhere in this space right here. And I am not there to fix. I don't believe coaching is a remedial thing at all. I'm there to help them see the things they can't see, show them to them, and then help them get there. And I am the biggest champion and ally of the people I work with you will ever meet. I am 100% rooting for them, and if I don't love them all the way through, I'm not working with them.
I love that. I love the two-sided authenticity. It takes two to really maybe get to the breakthrough. It can't be half-sided on either person's part that they're playing.
Not only do I believe that's true, I think the word coach has come to just encompass too many things. If it were something people understood more readily, I'd probably just say, I'm a guide. I'm going to take you into this wilderness. As Boyd Vardy said in The Lion Tracker's Guide to Life, I don't know where we're going, but I know exactly how to get there. I'm in the adventure with them, and I'm noticing things. I'm helping them find their tracks, but there's no fixing here. We're already, doing great. It's just, how do we clear away the things that aren't you so that the real you shows up and is powerful?
That's beautiful. I love that. Joseph, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to find you online?
You said some very, very kind things about LinkedIn. Thank you. That's my preferred way to find people. I also have a website that's a little bit quieter, josephlogan.com. But yeah, LinkedIn, if they were to look at any of my posts or to look at your posts, because I always love,
Yeah, you've been
oh my God,
supporting me
Christie.
so well. Yeah.
Anyone who's looking at Christie's posts, they'll find me right in the comments.
There are so many helpful things you said in this episode alone, so I have a feeling we're going to need to have you on again where we can go deeper maybe into some insights and tactics. And you've said so many one-liners in this episode. I've started writing them sideways. So we're going to just the social clips alone that we've gotten from this, we're so good that we're going to have you on again.
Thank you. I love what you're doing. I hope you will keep doing it bigger and bigger. It is amazing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that we're connected now and all the value you've given me. And I hope to just return it back as best I can. So thanks for coming on, and we'll have you on again.
Thank you.